parents and if children cannot literally eat, if they cannot have the basic essential things that everyone needs to live, of course they're going to flee, and that's what we're saying.
La vicepresidenta Kamala Harris rompe el silencio y habla sobre las causas fundamentales que originan la migración en Honduras, Guatemala y El Salvador. La crisis humanitaria más grande por la que pasan los países centroamericanos es la migración. Y es que según la información del portal de datos mundiales sobre la migración, detalló que para mediados del año 2020, un aproximado de 12.7 millones de personas salieron de sus hogares en busca de una mejor calidad de vida. Aunque este fenómeno ocurre a nivel mundial, Estados Unidos es el país con altos índices de migrantes internacionales, contabilizando un estimado de más de 50 millones. Es por ello que las políticas migratorias del país han sido muy cuestionadas a lo largo de los años, pero como una nueva forma de tratar el problema, la administración de Joe Biden puso a cargo a la vicepresidenta Kamala Harris para crear mejores políticas migratorias.
Let me ask about immigration.
Of course.
President Biden tasked you with leading diplomatic efforts to work with Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries to address the root causes of migration. How do you define success in this role?
It's a great question. Well, let's first talk about what it is. I come at this issue from the perspective that most people don't want to leave home. They don't want to leave their grandparents. They don't want to leave the place where they grew up, where they speak the language, where they know the culture, the place where they're from, the place that is home. Most people don't want to leave home, and when they do, it's usually for one of two reasons. They're fleeing some harm, or they cannot stay and satisfy the basic necessities of life, such as feeding their children and having a roof over their head. That is a big part of what is going on. So I look at the issue of what's going on in the Northern Triangle from that perspective. And then my take on it is that we've got to, understanding that, we have to give people some sense of hope. That if they stay, that help is on the way.
Harris, en su entrevista con la periodista Dana Bash de CNN, habló de las causas fundamentales que provocan la migración en Centroamérica. La vicepresidenta también enfatizó en que las personas no quieren dejar su hogar, su patria y su gente, pero se ven obligados debido a la falta de oportunidades que no les permite satisfacer las necesidades básicas de la vida, como alimentar a sus hijos y vivir dignamente.
I convened a group of members of our cabinet, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, the head of the USAID, which is our aid organization. Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, was a part of it. Jake Sullivan was a part of it. And bringing together members of our cabinet to do what, for example, is going to happen out of Commerce, which is they're going to convene a trade mission virtually now, and then the hope is in person later. With Agriculture, Tom Vilsack is going to increase our focus and our resources around helping the farmers in that region who have been devastated by crisis in terms of climate and drought. USAID, we're increasing our disaster response because, again, of the hurricanes. So this is the kind of work that has to happen. The kind of work that has to happen is the diplomatic work that we've been engaged in including my calls to the President of Mexico, the President of Guatemala, and we have a plan to actually have another meeting coming up soon.
Are you going to go there?
In that regard, it is, yes, we're working on the plan to get there. We have to deal with COVID issues, but I can't get there soon enough in terms of personally getting there. And then we have to also look at the piece about community-based organizations. So, for example, this week, next week, in addition to meeting again with the President of Guatemala, I will be meeting the following day with the community-based organizations in Guatemala. They call them basically civil society, to figure out how we can better assist what they're doing on the ground in a way, again, that they can give the resources to people who naturally want to stay at home and give them some sense of hope that help is on the way. This is the work that we're doing, but it's not going to be solved overnight. It's a complex issue.
Harris manifiesta que junto al gabinete están buscando la manera de cómo ayudar a los productores agrícolas de los países centroamericanos con más créditos y apoyo para fomentar la agricultura, que ha sido devastada por la sequía y desastres naturales. De igual forma, la vicepresidenta dijo que el plan también consiste en trabajar de cerca con la sociedad civil para que puedan dar los recursos a las personas que más lo necesiten.
And I will tell you, part of my approach to this is we've got to institutionalize the work and also internationalize it, which is why, for example, I'm working with Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, and we're going to be increasing the request we're making of our allies in the United Nations. Because again, this is about the Western Hemisphere. We are a neighbor in the Western Hemisphere, and it is also about understanding that we have the capacity to actually get in there if we are consistent. Part of the problem is that under the previous administration, they pulled out, essentially, a lot of what had been the continuum of work, and it essentially came to a standstill.
You're rebuilding it.
We have to rebuild it. And I've made it very clear to our team that this has to be a function of a priority that is an American priority and not just a function of whoever happens to be sitting in this chair. Because, for example, looking at, again, the root causes, extreme weather conditions has had a huge impact on one of their biggest industries, which is agriculture, including drought, right? Mm-hmm. And so a residual point not only is about the economic devastation and what we need to do to assist with economic development and relief, but it's also, they've got extreme hunger there and food insecurity. And so what we need to do to address that, because again, if parents and if children cannot literally eat, if they cannot have the basic essential things that everyone needs to live, of course they're going to flee, and that's what we're seeing.
Los futuros convenios que puedan existir entre México, Estados Unidos y el Triángulo Norte, entendiéndose como El Salvador, Honduras y Guatemala, parecen prometedores. Aunque no podemos descartar que en ocasiones no todo depende del país destinatario, lo cierto es que el exilio viene desde casa y con ello un largo camino y una mochila llena de esperanzas y sueños que terminan en todo menos en donde se originaron. Soy Daniela Cervellón y esto es Notibomba. Síguenos en nuestras redes sociales.